I'm Sandy Peterson, and this is my son Grant, one of the more experienced players of Cthulhu Wars. We're going to talk about the strategies in detail. I'm going to talk about the exact abilities and spellbooks each faction gets.
I'll be talking about strategies for playing each of the factions.
Let's talk about Black Goat. Black Goat starts here in West Africa with 6 cultists and a gate. Everyone has 6 cultists and a gate. So do they. Now, their faction abilities first are that as a fertility cult, when he summons monsters, he can summon multiple monsters at one or several gates. So for example, if he had a unit here in the Pacific and they wanted to summon monsters, they could spend 3 points and summon this guy up here, and 2 points on this guy here. For 5 points, you get 2 monsters in 2 areas. No waiting. So one of the advantages it gives him is he can react very quickly to an enemy intrusion into his territory. Other players have to either move people in or they have to summon just one monster, but Black Goat can get a bunch at once. Also, this enables Black Goat to recover very quickly from a major attack. If someone else is hit hard, then it may take 2 or 3 turns before they've gotten all the units back they lost. Black Goat, next turn they can have everything. Now, Black Goat, of course, is centered around Shub-Niggurath, the big mama here. And Shub-Niggurath's unique, well, let's talk about the monsters first, come to think about that before. So, okay, Shub-Niggurath has ghouls, which nominally cost 1. Now, Shub-Niggurath has a spellbook that she gets usually pretty early on that reduces the cost of all these monsters by 1. So a ghoul has a combat of 0 and costs 1 or 0 with the 1,000 Young spellbook. So it's a free monster once you get 1,000 Young. The fungi from Yuggoth are 1 combat monster that costs 2 to summon normally, or 1 if he has the 1,000 Young, which makes them the equivalent of a deep 1 in combat. And the Dark Young cost 3 and have rolled 2 dice in combat, or they will cost you 2 again if you have the 1,000 Young. A 2-point Dark Young is then equivalent in combat power and cost to a Shoggoth, except that of course it can't absorb, which makes the Shoggoth probably better in combat. Because Shub-Niggurath's monsters are not primarily combat oriented. We'll get into that a little bit. Now, Shub-Niggurath herself has the extremely useful ability of Avatar. And what this does is that she can spend 1 point and pick an area where there are any units. It can be her own, not just enemies. And then she swaps positions with them. So for example, if Shub-Niggurath wanted to avatar here, she'd spend 1 point, and then she'd say, I'm avataring here against green. Well, green has to pick one of his units to go where Shub-Niggurath is. So if he picks his cultist has to go live here in this hellhole full of Shub-Niggurath units, and Shub-Niggurath is here in the area. Then Shub-Niggurath can summon his own cultist, take the gate, or whatever he wants. Now, if instead the green player chooses to send the deep one to West Africa, then he has the cultist sitting here all alone and naked while Shub-Niggurath is right there staring down his throat. So you can also use Avatar to travel across the board or to quickly escape. If someone is coming after you, then you simply teleport back to your own area because you can Avatar with your own units as well as someone else's. You may only do Avatar once or twice a game, but it's very useful for striking out long range and messing with the enemy, doing various tricks and tactics. I think when you see its versatility, you'll be very impressed. Now, their spellbooks. Shub-Niggurath's spellbooks kind of follow a little pattern. They get a spellbook for having units in 4 different areas. So for example, here they are in 2 areas. If they moved a cultist here and say avatared here, suddenly poof, they're in 4 areas. They get a spellbook. They also get a spellbook for being in 6 areas, which is a little more awkward. And they also get, the 3rd spellbook is for being in 8 areas. So that's a kind of a challenging one to get. That's usually the last one they get. And there's a tendency for Shub-Niggurath as a player to spread out thin to get all these areas, and then they can get picked away at the periphery. And that's just life as Black Goat. That's what happens. You get picked away at the periphery. There's things you can do to mitigate that or to make you not care about it. We'll get to those in a second. Now, another standard feature of Black Goat is that she tends to kill her own cultists all the time. And that's one of the other spellbook she gets, which is eliminate 2 of your cultists as your sole action. So for your action in the turn, you say, I'm taking off 2 cultists and killing them there. That's my action. There's where it is. And that doesn't cost you any power, so you can use it as a waiting move, then you start summoning in the back gradually to get them. But that's one of your spell books. The fifth spell book I'm going to talk about is sharing areas with all the enemy units. You can usually get this at the same time you get the B in 6 areas or B in 8 areas or one of those other spell books, because you just have to make sure that some of the areas you go into, you're there with, you have a unit with green, you have a unit with red, you have a unit with yellow. So for example here, they would be in unit areas with all the opponents, he'd get that spell book. Okay, you can also use Avatar to do it, because you Avatar to a place where the enemy is and one of the units has to come back and be in your territory, so poof, you've got it right away. So they generally get those two spellbooks together. Their final spellbook is the same as everyone else gets, which is the one where you awaken your Great Old One, which I now recall I haven't mentioned that. To awaken Shub-Niggurath, you have to be in an area with a gate that you control, with at least 2 cultists. You eliminate 2 of those cultists, well, we'll take them off the board. Eliminate 2 of the cultists, and Shub-Niggurath, you pay 8 power, Shub-Niggurath appears on the board. So she only costs 8, unlike Cthulhu, who costs 10, and Nyarlathotep, who also costs 10, but you do have to remove the 2 cultists, which then you can get back later on. So she's kind of all about, like I said, eliminating cultists. Now, for her spellbooks, an early spellbook she likes a lot is Frenzy. Frenzy gives each of your cultists a combat value of 1, so now they can roll dice in combat. One obvious use of this is if you're in an area like this where you have cultists and they have cultists, or even if they moved a monster in to attack you, you can declare combat with a cultist, roll a die, and have a 50% chance of knocking their guy out of the area or even sometimes killing him. That's something that no other cultist can do. Another special power they have is the Thousand Young. This is a signature power of the Black Goat. The Thousand Young you can only use if Shub-Niggurath is in play, but what it does is it makes all your monsters cost less. I referenced this earlier because it's so powerful. In fact, for only 10 power, you can summon every single monster you have in the game onto the map at once. I haven't seen that exactly then, but I've seen 5 or 6 monsters summoned at a time. Okay.
And begin.
Okay. Third spell we're going to discuss is Necrophagy. Necrophagy is the ghoul spellbook. This is another spellbook that lets you reach out and touch your friends. What it does is, when ghouls have a combat of 0, but they're still great because they're free, and also because whenever there's a combat somewhere, for example, say that up here there was a fight between green and blue. After the fight's over, you can teleport a ghoul from anywhere on the map, as long as that ghoul wasn't involved in the fight, to the area. And we'll take him out of the way. And then for each ghoul you teleport into the area, there's an extra pane on both sides of the combat. So as one example, see this was the final result of a combat between green and blue. The green and blue guys had kicked the area, there was fighting, and there was these guys left. You then teleport into your one ghoul, both of them are paned out of the area. And look, there's your ghoul in the area with an empty gate that you can move cultists onto or whatever you want. And it wasn't even your turn, so if your turn's coming up next, you can put a guy there or recruit your own ghoul. In addition, it's a good way of getting your ghouls across the board in various places to help fulfill those get 8 areas and get 6 area spellbooks. The other players hate having Necrophagy go off. They always, after every combat, they look at you with the adorable puppy eyes, hoping you won't do it, but then you do, so that's how it is. Okay, Groth. Groth is the spellbook for the fungi. And the Groth is kind of an interesting spellbook because it can be a strategy all by itself. And what it works out is that you must have one or more fungi on the board. And for each area in which you have a fungus, so you want to spread them out, you don't want them all in one place, you have a chance of getting a success. You roll 1 die, and if you roll equal to or less than the number of areas you have funguses in, which is maximum of 4, then that's your result. Say you roll a 3, 3 is your result. The other players then have 1 minute to decide how they want to divide up that 3 between them, and for each point they take, they lose 1 cultist. They pick who the cultist is. So if you roll a 3, they lose 3 cultists between them. If they can't decide at the end of a minute, you decide for them. So you could say, for example, well, I think Yellow Sign should lose all 3, or whatever you want. It costs 2 points to use Groth. On the average, you kill slightly less than 2 cultists, but sometimes you get 4. And then there's also the advantage that if you do it near the end of a round when people are short on power, they often can't afford to replace the cultists they lost. And if they're low on cultists as Cthulhu, for example, often is, then because they're turning them into deep ones and whatever, then by killing cultists using Groth, they can sometimes lose gates, which is huge. So be aware of Groth as a possible thing. I've seen a guy Groth 3 or 4 times at a turn and essentially empty the map of cultists. It was terrifying. Then of course they still had power left. They had to use the power to get the cultists back, but they were doing that instead of coming to fight Black Goat. Third, there is the Red Sign, one of the best spells in the game. It's so good that when I was talking about Cthulhu, I accidentally called these guys Red Sign instead of the Black Goat. So the Red Sign, that is the signature spell book for the Dark Young. And what it does is, during Gather Power, your Dark Young produce power, just like a cultist. Your Dark Young can sit on gates, just like a cultist. And your Dark Young can build gates by sending 3 power, just like a cultist. In fact, they act like a cultist in every way that's good for you, but not in the ways that are bad for you. So you can't, for example, they can't be captured like a cultist. You know, they're not vulnerable to the things that cultists are vulnerable to. So this gives you 3 extra characters that can generate power for you, and really 50% more gates you can occupy. I've seen Black Goat be pretty solid with power, even with only the Dark Young on the map and no cultists left because they sacrificed them all. The final spellbook, well, what I'm talking about, it may not be your final spellbook you earn, is the Blood Sacrifice. What this does is when you perform a ritual of annihilation, you can remove a cultist from the board and get an extra Elder Sign. This is huge. It doubles the Elder Signs you get per ritual. You combine this with the fact that the Dark Young give you extra gates you can control and give you power to make up for the fact you're losing the cultist. You got Dark Young on the map. It all kind of channels together. So if Black Goat is able to be unmolested in her African home and the areas around it, then she can really be a threat to the other players, and they have to come in there and deal with her. Thanks.